I never thought that a simple daily routine could turn intimate moment. Standing in front of the mirror, we gazed into each other's eyes, his arm tightly wrapped around my waist, and me leaning on him, feeling his warmth. Chapter 45. His arm wrapped tightly around my waist as he led me to our washroom, and I leaned onto him, letting him support most of my weight. I was still far too unsteady to walk on my own. I swiveled around on the balls of my feet as we came to stand before the mirror. My hair looked a bit more dry than usual, and my lips were pale. But what stood out the most was the bruises on my throat. My hand flew up to the bluish-purple skin and I pressed against it tenderly, wincing at the immediate pain. My eyes darted over to Alaricus to see him staring at my reflection. His lips pressed together tightly as he stared at my throat. His jaw was clenched tightly as he fought to rein in his temper. Now that it was clear that I was going to recover fully, his concern was starting to turn to anger. "I can't believe that Mutt had the nerve to touch you, to harm his queen." Alaricus growled angrily, the veins of his forearm that was wrapped around my waist sticking out prominently. "Calm down, Alaricus. I'm all right." He got what he deserved. I consoled him gently, leaning up to press a kiss to the tick in his jaw. He visibly relaxed at my words, giving me a small nod. Alaricus leaned forward to grab my toothbrush, handing it to me before grabbing the toothpaste and adding a long line of it to the bristles. I turned on the faucet, wetting my toothbrush, while Alaricus did the same for his. I leaned into Alaricus' side as we brushed our teeth, trying to focus on really getting the brush and the toothpaste spread all around my mouth. Looking up into the mirror, I raised my brow at Alaricus, who sported a goofy grin as he watched our reflections, brushing his own teeth, his smile getting wider as my eyes met his in the reflection. "This just feels like such a couple-wide thing to do." His voice muffled by the brush and I snorted at him. He was undoubtedly the biggest dork I had ever known. I leaned forward to spit out the toothpaste, before rinsing the brush into my mouth. I waited patiently as he did the same. "Undress me?" I asked hoarsely as soon as he was finished, and his eyes widened as he gulped, seeming both nervous but also desirous. I turned to face him, looking into his eyes expectantly as his hands found the top button of my silk pajama shirt. His hands seemed to tremble a bit, and I braced myself, preparing to put all my weight on my feet despite how weak I still felt. Taking my hand off the sink, I put both hands over his, using them to lower his arms. I kept my eyes on his as I slowly brought my hands to the hem of his shirt, pulling it up slowly, and he caught on, raising his arms for me as I raised the shirt over his head. I let my hands trail over the beautiful glowing taunt skin that had been revealed, taking my time to explore his muscled chest, and his hands found my waist as my hands moved lower to his ABS. I trailed my fingers over them slowly, enjoying how defined they were, tracing them for the very first time after all those times of simply admiring them from afar. I looked up back into his eyes to see them glowing brightly with desire. My teeth sank into my soft bottom lip as a wave of desire shot through me. Knowing the way I affected him made me more bold, and my hands were soon on his V-line. I traced it tantalizingly slowly with my index finger, following its path with my eyes, and I heard Alaricus' breathing grow heavy as I reached the top of his pants. I let my thumbs sink under them, and I lowered them, hooking his briefs along with them. My eyes feasted over all of him, all of what was mine, and blood rushed to my cheeks as I caught sight of the evidence of his approval for my behavior. He was definitely large, larger than what I had even thought possible. I looked up at him, keeping my eyes level with his chest, suddenly feeling too shy to look into his eyes. "My sweet angel," Alaricus murmured gently, his hands cupping my warm cheeks, as his thumbs ran over the blush of them. He raised my chin so that I was looking into his eyes. He looked at me as though asking for permission, and I simply nodded in response. His hands were much more steady now as he slowly undid the buttons of his shirt, his fingers trailing over my cold skin as he brushed it off my shoulders, leaving a trail of heat in their wake. My chest began to heave as my breathing grew heavy. He reached around me, undoing the navy blue bra I had on with ease, But he didn't take it off of me yet. He bent down, hooking his thumbs past the top of my pajama pants, to my panties, and kept his eyes locked with mine as he slowly slid them down my legs. He rose back up, stopping to press a gentle kiss to the soft skin of my stomach, still never looking away from my eyes. He slid the bra down my shoulders. My heart pounded in my chest as his eyes finally unlocked from mine, now looking at the newly revealed skin. He took his time exploring me with his eyes, looking at every part of me, his eyes still alight with desire, but beginning to soften to a warmer honey. I've seen more sunsets and midnights than I can remember, but never have I seen anything as beautiful as you, Alarikas mumbled, opening his arms up to me, and I stepped forward into them, my cheeks burning an even brighter red than before at his words. But this blush was not from embarrassment, but from my uncontrollable happiness at his words. Every part of my body was flush against his, and he leaned down to press it and a kiss to the top of my head. It felt so nice to have our warm bare skin pressed together that way. Mumira Kalam, he whispered to me, nuzzling his nose into my hair before pulling away. He leaned down, wrapping his arm around my waist and under my knees before he swung me up into his chest, making me giggle. He sat me down at the side of the gigantic square tub as he turned on the water, plugging it when the water began to turn hot, before he started pulling bottles of soaps and salts out of the cabinets. I crossed my legs as I watched his impressive form move around the tub, getting our bath ready, a sexy confident smirk tilting up his plump red lips as he caught me staring. I licked my lips and he groaned out loud, making me laugh even though it hurt my throat. The gigantic tub was finally full, and he turned off the water. Before helping me stand up, he lifted me up by my hips, gently setting me into the warm water. I shifted forward to give Alarikas room to get in behind me, and he did. He settled me between his legs and I moved back to lean against his broad chest. Alarikas adjusted himself so that his arousal was not so evidently pushing against my back. But really, where could you hide away something so large? I let out a quiet sigh as snuggled into him and he tightened his arms around me. We soaked in the hot water quietly for a bit, simply enjoying being so close to one another, a sense of serenity passing through me. I had never been arrogant or particularly proud of my appearance, and being without clothes or nearly so had been quite an uncomfortable thing for me, especially in the presence of others. But there was just something so peaceful about being with Alarikas this way, feeling all of him against me, being so close with absolutely no barriers between us. Surely I couldn't have done this with anyone but Alarikas. Never would I feel as comfortable with another person. When you loved someone, you wanted to be as close to them as humanly possible, not only physically but spiritually, and I had never felt so close to him, so one with him as I did right in this moment. At first I had thought that the water could have been hotter, but with the temperature that Alarikas constantly ran at, it would have become too hot. Alarikas would occasionally press sweet kisses to my shoulder as we sat in comfortable silence, simply basking in one another's presence. Alarikas grabbed my coral-colored loofah off the side of the bath, and I raised my arms, allowing him to gently rub them. He moved me forward so that he could do my back as well. The loofah was soon completely soaked as he ran it all over me. He massaged some of my shampoo into my hair, and a blissful moan escaped my lips at how good it felt, a quiet growl rumbling through his chest at that. He rinsed out the shampoo before doing the same with my conditioner. He ran his fingers through my thick chocolate hair, separating the strands with his fingers, the slight stinging sensation of my scalp at that motion surprisingly erotic. I turned around, straddling his lap now. I had to take a moment to compose myself upon seeing the way Alarikas looked, his dark hair messy, some strands falling onto his forehead due to the heat, clear beads of water all over his tanned skin, impressive broad chest on display as his powerful arms rested on either side of the bath as he looked up at me. He looked so strong and large, like a true king. I bit my lip harshly as I tried to contain the way I was feeling right now. Letting out a deep breath, I grabbed his grey loofah, adding some of his body wash to it before I began to rub it into his chest. My hands trembled slightly as he simply sat back, watching me as I became a mess at the mere sight of him. I washed over his broad shoulders and arms, leaning over him to get his back, feeling his warm breath blow over my breasts as I rubbed the body wash into his back. I gulped audibly as I sat back down into the water, my eyes falling to his member, knowing that is what I would have to wash next. I swallowed nervously, looking up into his eyes shyly from beneath my lashes, but he made no move, so I looked back down. I ran the loofah up and down slowly over the length of him. Right as I reached the tip, he suddenly grabbed both my wrists in his hands. The loofah fell into the water with a splash as I looked into his blazing golden eyes. He pulled me closer so that I was now basically perched in his lap, my legs wrapped tightly around his waist. The very part of him that I had been washing pressed against the most sensitive part of me. "Do you know I can smell your arousal?" Alarikas growled lowly, the sound of his husky desire-laced voice not making things any easier for me. "Do you have any idea how crazy you're driving me? Do you, Angel?" His grip still tight on my wrists. "I want you so fucking bad. But I won't do anything right now. Do you know why that is, Amara?" He asked me, and I shook my head slowly in response, my chest rising and falling rapidly as I tried to regulate my labored breathing. His hands freed my wrists, and my hands fell to his broad shoulders as his arms wrapped around my waist. He pulled me flush against him, my chin resting on his shoulder as I was now completely sitting in his lap. He turned his head to slowly run his nose along the side of my throat. "When I pleasure you, I'm going to have you screaming my name. We can't have you doing that right now. Can we, baby?" Alarikas whispered heatedly into my ear, flicking his tongue teasingly over my earlobe, and I couldn't help the whimper that escaped my lips. My core clenched at the feeling of his strong grip and husky deep voice. A shaky breath left my lips as I pulled back slightly, looking into his eyes for a moment before crashing my lips onto his. His lips immediately began moving against mine, dominating my mouth with his. He kissed me with a hungry fervor that had my toes curling, and I couldn't help the rocking of my hips. He growled out a moan against my lips, before pushing his tongue into my mouth, battling with my own as we explored each other's mouths. My hands now trailed all over his back, fingers digging into his skin as he adjusted me in his lap, having unintentionally rubbed me in all the right ways. I pulled away from his lips for a moment to breathe before slamming my mouth to his once again. He leaned up, strong chest arching as he responded to my ferocity. His hands traveled all over the length of my bare back, before beginning to explore my curves. I gasped, pulling away from his lips as one of his hands squeezed my upper thigh tightly, panting desperately for air as Alarikas railed kisses down my jaw to my throat, where his kisses became much gentler. He licked over the bruises tenderly, letting go of my thigh to hug me to him. I slumped against his chest, struggling to compose myself, letting my forehead rest on his as he took his face out of the crook of my neck, sitting up straight again. The both of us breathing heavily, inhaling some of the air the other breathed out. Neither of us had completely gotten what we wanted, but yet I couldn't help but feel satisfied. He stroked my wet hair as I rested against his chest, and I wrapped my arms around him, slouching a bit to rest my face against his shoulder. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm," I mumbled against his skin, pressing a kiss to it, and he gently grabbed my shoulder to pull me away so he could look at my face. He asked, looking genuinely confused. I looked pointedly at what was showing that he had definitely not yet finished. "Don't apologize, my love. Now is definitely not a good time for us to go there. Being with you will always be enough for me, and we will never do anything until you are completely ready. You don't owe me anything. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I also don't think you want to accept my curse yet. Do you?" Alarikas asked, and I shook my head. I didn't want to be frozen for eternity at 19. I at least wanted Alarikas and I's ages to look similar. Not that we currently looked like a strange couple. Alarikas didn't look a day over 28, but I would rather my appearance look more mature. I also just wasn't ready to have a baby yet. Protection did not really work well for werewolves. Later, I answered, and he nodded understandingly. He held me in his arms for a few moments, the both of us staying still until our breathing and heart rates had gone back down to their normal pace. I was so content I could have stayed there for forever. "Let's take a shower to get all these thoughts off of us," Alarica said, helping me up to stand in the bath by my hips. My cheeks turned red as I saw him bite his lip as he looked at my without clothes form, shaking his head to get himself out of his trance. He stood up, hoisting me into his arms again. He stepped out of the bath. He let out a laugh as he saw me making a face at all the water that dripped off of us onto the floor as he carried me into the shower. He turned it on, and the large shower rained cold water down on us that had me clinging to Alarica's. He yelled his apologies as he immediately put me down and out of the way of the icy cold water, pulling me back into his chest by my hand as the water began to warm. He gently massaged my hair, making sure all the conditioner that had managed to stay in there got out. I had to go on my toes as he leaned down so I could shampoo his hair, realizing we had never gotten that far in the bath. I turned off the shower as Alarica grabbed both our towels, wrapping me up in mine. Before he began drying himself off, I took the towel off to run it through my hair, sending Alarica a daring wink as I caught him giving me a discreet once-over. A boyish grin spread on his face in response. I loved how easy our relationship was. I could quite contently spend the rest of my life simply fooling around with Alarica. Truthfully, I could happily spend all of eternity with Alarica by my side. Alarica passed me my bathrobe from one of the cupboards and I wrapped that around myself, reveling in how soft the fuzzy material was as I towel dried my hair. Alarica ran his fingers through his dark, wet hair, his biceps flexing as he ruffled up the drying strands. I let my hair be. It would dry on its own eventually. The dark, damp strands splayed all over the shoulders of my bathrobe. Alarica wrapped his arms around my waist, tugging me into his chest. I rested my hand on his chest, catching myself there. I looked up at him curiously to see him grinning down at me, his dimples prominent in his cheeks. Thin, sharp jaw expanded slightly with the smile he wore. Honey eyes crinkled at the corners. He was breathtaking. "You're so beautiful," he mumbled, brushing back a lock of hair that had fallen onto my cheek, and he cradled my cheek in his hand tenderly, rubbing his rough thumb over the soft skin at the apple of my cheeks. "The first time I saw you, I thought you were the most beautiful thing I had ever laid eyes on. But every day that I spend with you, the more that I get to know you, the more beautiful you become to me. I cannot believe how lucky I am to have you in my life," Alarica said, and I nuzzled my face into his palm in response. "I love you," I whispered to him, meaning every word with every fiber of my being. I loved him so much it overwhelmed me. It was in every breath I took, every move I made. It made me his, and it made him mine. His eyes softened with delight at my words, his smile melting to a more sincere one, the kind that forms uncontrollably when experiencing absolute bliss. "I love you," Alarica whispered back. The end. Epilogue. 14 years later, I caught the attention of the waiter that was currently darting past me, trying to keep all the empty champagne flutes on his tray upright. "Alfred, can you get those kids away from the cupcakes, please? They're not even eating them anymore. Now they're just smashing them against their own faces and it's starting to disturb me," I whispered to him. "Right away, Mrs. Knight," he replied, respectfully bowing his head before making his way over to them. "How's my angel doing?" a deep husky voice asked from behind, one breath blowing a few silky strands of my hair into view. "Where were you?" I asked, whirling around to look at Alarica. His eyes widened as he realized he was in trouble, and he rubbed the back of his head as he looked anywhere but straight into my eyes, struggling to come up with a good excuse. "You could lie for centuries, but still not be able to successfully lie to your wife. Jay, just around." He stuttered, failing miserably at sounding casual. "You got them a bouncy castle, didn't you?" Shaking my head when all I got in response was a sheepish grin. "They really wanted one, and I've never been in one before," Alarica whined, pouting adorably to convince me. "Wait, not only were my children in there, but my husband was in there too." I asked sharply, and his eyes widened to the size of saucers as he shook his head rapidly. The uneven weight distribution just made it more dangerous. I'm sorry. You know I can't say no to her. Her birthday is next month. Alaricus argued, as though that validated him allowing our children to get into a death trap. The amount of legs those things have broken is ridiculous. Children were too fragile for that death contraction. That does not make it okay. But come midnight, if I can get a turn, then I might think of forgiving you, I said, making a huge grin spread across his face, and he leaned forward to peck my lips. That's my wife, he mumbled against my lips. A little body crashed into my legs, and I looked down to see the chocolate-colored hair of my son, his little arms wrapped tightly around my legs as he buried his face into the soft material of my dress. I ran my fingers through the messy array of waves on his head, causing him to look up with a smile spread on his round face. He looked so cute in his little black tuxedo. I could just eat him up. I bent down and he let me go, pressing a deep kiss to his chubby cheek. Milo wrinkled his adorable little nose as he tried to wipe my lipstick smudge off of his face, glaring at me with chocolate eyes identical to mine. What's my little prince been up to? Smiling as I saw his eyes light up. Look, Mama, I picked you some flowers, Milo said, bouncing as he pointed towards the gift stable. A little bouquet of light purple-colored tulips was tied up with a pretty white ribbon and tied on top of the gift I had gotten Alaricus. Happy anniversary, Mama, my son said, beaming up at me with his big eyes, and my heart swelled up to double its size in my chest at the sight. Thank you, baby. Those are the prettiest flowers I've ever seen, I cooed, making his smile grow brighter and his cheeks to redden, a dimple identical to Alaricus becoming prominent in his cheek. Looking up to meet Alaricus' eyes, I saw him looking at us, his eyes having softened to the point where they looked like melted pools of honey. Where's your sister? I asked my 5-year-old, and he shrugged his petite shoulders, making the little black bow atop his dress shirt become crooked. I fixed that for him, and he whispered a shy thank you. I could quite literally watch my son just be cute for the rest of eternity. I looked around, hoping to catch sight of my daughter amongst all the guests we had invited. Normally anniversaries and birthdays were something Alaricus and I liked to celebrate with just our family. But since we had gone to countless celebrations at various alphas, homes, we had decided to get them all together in the palace under the excuse of our anniversary. Alaricus and I had celebrated by ourselves when the clock had struck midnight last night, leaving the kids with a babysitter while we went out for the night. While little Milo was just like me, very mellow and to quiet activities, my daughter was like Alaricus, so I could not say I was surprised when I saw her threatening a terrified-looking teen boy. She had definitely gotten the alpha gene from Alaricus, and his temper, but just like my husband, my little girl had the sweetest soft side reserved only for family. I also never had to worry about Milo in school that way. She always protected him from any of the kids that decided to make fun of him because he was not into sports like the other boys, but enjoyed drawing and playing house. Lilium, Alaricus called, and she was immediately broken out of her anger fit. She looked around the hall, her big honey-colored eyes darting all around until they settled on us. She hitched up the skirts of her already knee-high dress and ran over to us, hitting straight into her father's legs. We still needed to work on her stopping while running. She ran too fast and then was not able to stop. He swung her up into his arms. How's my little warrior? Alaricus cooed, gently squeezing her cheek. I'm good, Daddy. That stupid boy was trying to unwrap the gifts. Craning her neck to look for him, but the boy was lucky enough to have escaped. We had decided to name her after Alaricus, beloved little sister, unlike what Alaricus had told me of his sister, to be very gentle and fragile. Our Lydian was truly a little warrior, strong and protective. I was in my 3rd trimester when I had thought of the name, and I still remember my husband tearing up when I had told him. It had been the most beautiful thing when she was born, and he had cradled our beautiful little baby girl in his arms, whispering Lilium to her with tears pouring down his smiling face. I had already been crying cause of the pain, but then I was outright sobbing after seeing that display. Happy anniversary, Mama and Daddy, she said, looking between the both of us with a melting smile on her beautiful little face. "Thank you, baby," we said simultaneously, going in to kiss her still chubby cheeks. She was turning 9 next month, and although I could see she would have a thinner jaw like Alarica's, she thankfully still was yet to lose her chubby baby cheeks. Alarica's put her down as she came over to me, obstinately playing with the bottom tendrils of my hair. She had long black silky straight hair, but Alarica's absolutely did not want us cutting except for getting her regular trims. He told her she had hair like her grandmother's and she didn't want to cut it off then. It looked quite beautiful, to be honest, and if she liked it long, then how could I ever have it cut? Lilium was beautiful, tanned skin like Alarica's, with his eye color, except hers didn't have the gold flecks in them since she was human. Our curse, thankfully, had not passed down to our children, since it was not a genetic thing the way it was for most werewolves. It didn't pass down from parents to child. I sadly hadn't gotten a wolf when we had first made love when I was 21, having completely accepted him, but yet I got only the eternity part of his curse. I guess Eros was only Alarica's. It was heartbreaking that our children would not live for eternity with us, but they would have long-lasting human lives. We would make sure of that. In a way, I was happy for them. Alarica's and I had each other. If they lived eternally, my little Monksians would have to endure the pain of losing the love of their lives. As much as I wanted them around for eternity, it really was a curse. Had it not been for Alarica's, I would never choose this for myself. The both of us had been devastated for weeks when Lilium was born, and we realized her genes weren't altered the way the curse had done ours. But eventually we had come to terms with it. I would much rather face the pain of living without them than see my children lose their soul, mates, and have to live their eternal lives with that pain. "I'm hungry," Lilium said, and Alarica's grabbed her small hand, tugging her towards him gently. "Let's get some food in that little monster belly," Alarica's said, tickling her tummy, making her giggle loudly. There was just something about your child's laugh. You could never get tired of hearing it. Milo and Lilium's laughs were my favorite sounds in the world. "You hungry, my little prince?" Alarica's asked Milo, crouching down to his height. But Milo shook his head. Alarica's pressed a kiss to Milo's soft cheek, smiling warmly at me before the father and daughter were off. Both my children had inherited my sweet tooth, and judging by his purple tongue, Milo had found the cupcakes. "Bring us macarons," I called after the father and daughter. They both turned around, giving me a thumbs up each, making little Milo giggle. "How many cupcakes has my Milo monster had?" I asked him, crouching to be level with him. His eyes widened in response, and just like his father, he looked everywhere but me as he held up 3 little fingers. I raised a brow at him, and magically 2 more fingers went up as he hung his head in shame. I had to smother my grin. It actually took a lot of effort to keep a straight face when scolding children. The reason for their scolding was either hilarious or adorable. There were some times when you had to grit your teeth so hard to keep from yelling that if you didn't take good care of your teeth, they'd pop right out of your gums. But luckily those were few and far between. "It's okay only for today, but tomorrow you are having fruit instead of dessert," I tell Milo, and he pouts but nods his head. Both my children had yet to break my record of cupcakes eaten in one sitting, a number I would never disclose in the presence of an adult other than Alarica's. Knowing him, he'd probably try to beat my record. "Can I get you anything, Your Majesty?" a male voice said, and I tensed, a bit startled, having been lost in my own thought. Before I could reply, I heard the weirdest little sound come from my son, and I frowned, wondering if the cupcakes had somehow broken my son. It was what I imagined what the sound of a kitten stuck in a car's engine would sound like. The poor waiter looked just as startled as I was, and I leaned down to look at my son, my eyes widening as I realized what that was, judging by the way his little button nose was scrunched up. The rosy cheek cherub had just attempted to growl at the waiter. He was standing in front of me protectively in all his 3.5-foot glory. I was going to murder Alarica's. "I'm all right, Anthony. Thank you, and I'm really sorry about Milo." "Milo, apologize," I commanded my son, and he mumbled a tense apology. The poor confused waiter just nodded, scurrying away mumbling to himself. merely bumping into a table in his hurry. "Did Daddy put you up to this?" I asked, and Milo shook his head, not making eye contact again. "We both know that's not true, Milo. Now I am going to wait until you tell me what's really going on. That was very rude of you. You should not be disrespecting anyone. I know my Milo knows better than that," I said to him, my heart melting as he looked up at me with his lips in a trembling pout, and his big eyes shiny with tears. "I'm sorry, Mama," he said to me, his little body jolting with a hiccup. "Daddy said Lilium and I have to protect Mama when he's not there. Mama is very beautiful, so bad men will come and try to talk to you." Milo admitted to me, "I'm going to have a talk with your father. I'm not mad at you, baby. Don't be upset, little one. It's just never okay to be mean to anyone, unless they're mean to you first," I said, and his face brightened a bit upon hearing I wasn't mad at him. "Then we kick their butt," Milo said, and I giggled but nodded, getting down on my knees to brush my nose affectionately against my son's. "Hi, Amara. Happy anniversary," a soft voice said from behind me, and I got up off my knees, turning around to see Evangeline. As I had predicted when she was born, baby Evangeline was growing up to be a stunner. Both siblings were truly. Her dark brown hair came up to under her shoulders and framed her rounded face beautifully. She still had the big baby eyes thing going on, and it made her look adorable. She just had an air of innocence around her that made everyone adore her. "Hi, honey. Thanks for coming," I said to her, pulling her in for a hug. She was already an inch taller than me, sadly, but having been there when she was born, she would always be a baby to me. "How's Lihua doing?" I asked her teasingly, making her cheeks turn pink. Evangeline was just the cutest thing in the world. It had been just a few weeks ago when she had accidentally come out to Alaricas as a lesbian. She had been there to drop some file her forgetful parents had left at their house, since they had moved out of the palace years ago, and were now both royal advisors. Evangeline had run into Alaricas in the halls, and while they were talking she had just blurted it out. I guess it had been hard to keep it bottled up. Safe to say Alaricas was surprised. But centuries of living did you well in situations like that. After his first stupid attempt at humor by saying how he had only asked if she was enjoying the weather, when she had begun to tear up he had recovered immediately and told her that it really didn't matter what gender she was attracted to. We had all found out that day, and well, most of the day had been spent comforting her and relaxing her after the huge step she had taken by coming out. Luckily there wasn't anyone who she had told that had a negative response. It broke my heart when people did that. "Hello, Frank." "Hey, Victoria," I said as they finally managed to find us. But I refrained from hugging either of them as the both of them had a horrible cold, and were probably only here to make an appearance. "Happy anniversary," the couple said to me, both sounding nasally. I thanked them and directed them towards where the soups were with the appetizers, so they could at the very least have something to eat before going home to rest. I had to remember to tell Evangeline to take soup with her when she was leaving, just so neither of her sick parents would have to worry about cooking, and we would have so much left over anyway. Evangeline was busy playing with Milo when I finally saw him. "Happy anniversary, Mari," Adrian said to me, and I wrapped my arms around his lanky form, pulling him in for a tight hug. With his bright blue eyes and messy curly hair, handsome, he wasn't much of a player, but like many 21-year-olds, he was just kind of dating casually for now. "Thank you, Munkin," I said, knowing full well that he did not want me calling him now that he was an adult. He would always be the chubby-cheeked, cuddly 5-year-old to me. He gave me a flat look which I returned with a toothy smile. "How is Lihua?" I asked, turning back to Evangeline as I heard her giggle at her brother and eyes exchange. "She's doing well. She's really happy I came out so she doesn't have to pretend to just be my friend anymore," Evangeline admitted, and I cooed at her reddening cheeks at the mention of her girlfriend, looking at Adrian from the corner of my eye to see him smiling warmly at his sister. He had been quite offended she hadn't told him first, but since he practically worshipped Alaricas, he was easy to pacify. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Logan, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." "Evangeline," Alaricas greeted, and they both immediately went to greet him. Evangeline with a hug, And Adrian a respectful handshake as always. Alaricus had even asked them to call him by his first name, but the siblings refused. As did their parents. They had known me since before I was the queen. Though as soon as they had started the Your Majesty nonsense with me, I had put a stop to it immediately. They were practically family. Alaricus and Evangeline chatted quietly amongst each other as Adrian played with Milo, wrestling with them playfully. Milo wasn't very violent until you got him very mad. Then, like me, his dark side came out. Even then, I doubt my son could hurt a fly. He'd freaked out his kindergarten teacher, though, by saying he hoped she choked on one of her salted peanuts and fell asleep forever when she had accidentally ruined his family picture that he kept in his class cubby. Alaricus and I had to visit the school due to that. Unfortunately, Alaricus thought it was hilarious at first. Only because he realized Milo had inherited my twisted side. But we had had about as sound a conversation you could have with a 5-year-old about death threats as we could when we got home. You two must be hungry. Please go help yourselves to some snacks. I'm afraid you all missed dinner, but I'll have some and serve you as soon as you're seated. I told the siblings when Alaricus and Evangeline looked about done with their conversation, and Milo had bitten Adrian's ear. His teacher had told them about how her bunny had bitten her, and since then, when trying to win a fight, Milo now bit people. I really had to put a stop to that. Dinner sounds good, Adrian said. Wrapping his arm around his sister's shoulders, he led her to where their parents were seated. A server had already made their way over to the table. Mama, will you tie my hair? Lilia asked, and I smiled, nodding as she turned to face away from me. Pulling her hair back, I ran my fingers through it to smooth it out before tying it loosely as a high ponytail. A few strands escaped till I couldn't help myself as I leaned down, pressing a kiss to her nose as she turned to look at me. My daughter was so cute in her yellow dress, my heart was going to explode. She wrinkled her little nose. A habit Alaricus was ecstatic my kids had inherited from me. Thank you, she said brightly, before hiking up her dress and running off to God knows where to play with her friends. Alaricus, would you like to explain to me why our 5-year-old just growled at a waiter? I asked him pleasantly, internally gloating as I watched his face turn pale. He glanced down at Milo, who twisted up his face apologetically. They stared at one another wide-eyed for a moment, both seeming quite stumped as to how to handle me. I'm going to start off by saying how sorry I am, Alaricus said, discreetly sliding Milo to stand between us, probably in the hopes that he wouldn't be physically harmed if he used the monkey as a shield. I crossed my arms over my chest, looking at him expectantly. It was an impulsive move after seeing the pup flirt with you a few months ago. It was very wrong, I admit, and I promised to have a talk with Milo and Lilium to clear this misunderstanding up. I'd also like to take a moment now to say how thankful I am that you are such a sweet-tempered angel. A few months ago, Alpha Uki had brought his son to a meeting, and he, never having met Alaricus or I before, had no idea I was Alaricus' mate and hit on me. Of course, Sire Pouty was infuriated and sent poor Haru very dark looks for the rest of the night, despite the fact that Haru had apologized numerous times to the both of us. I'm letting this go because it's our anniversary, and I really like you in that color, I said, unable to stop my eyes from trailing down to the maroon dress shirt that he wore, having taken off his jacket earlier during the night. Your daughter looks like a female version of the Alpha King, which is surprisingly cute, a husky feminine voice said, effectively distracting me from my husband, and I turned around to see Nicole. She looked absolutely breathtaking in a fitted silver shimmery dress with a side slit that exposed her toned legs. Alaricus is adorable, I argued, and she raised a brow at me, not looking convinced at all. I suppressed my smile as I saw Alaricus whisper adorable to himself with a cute little smirk on his handsome face. I wish you had gotten the chance to say hi to Lian. You're basically her idol, I told Nicole, and a soft smile spread across her face. Well, she's basically exactly how my kid would be if I had one, so I'll make sure to hunt her down before the party's over, Nicole said, greeting Alaricus respectfully as she noticed him playing with Milo near us. Her dark eyes lit up as she caught sight of Milo, who was now in his father's arms, and hiding his face into his father's chest. I grabbed a macaroon from the assortment of flavors Alaricus had brought back, pleasantly surprised to find it was matcha green tea flavored. "Hey Milo," Nicole said, trying to make her voice sound a little less deep to sound less serious than she normally did. It didn't work very well though, sadly. "Say hi Milo," Alarikas cooed, bouncing us on his arms comfortingly. Milo finally peeked his face out from his father's chest to get a good look at Nicole. His cheeks reddened as he noticed she was staring right back at him. Milo mumbled a quiet hi while looking at her from beneath his long lashes, and in that moment all three of us wanted to eat his face because he was unbearably cute. Nicole lunged forward, using her warrior-like reflexes to peck him on his cheek. Before he could even figure out what had happened, she was standing upright next to me again. Alarikas, and was mid-air, seeming as though he had caught himself right in the middle of the act of protecting his youngest by pushing her away. But luckily he had been able to stop himself before he hurt her. Eros was really starting to come to surface. There was only a week to the full moon, which meant his primal instincts were very strong. As playful as Eros was with our children, he was fiercely protective of them, even more so than Alarikas. I gave Nicole a chastising glare as Milo buried himself into his father's arms, gripping tightly onto Alarikas' collar to hide his most likely flaming red cheeks. "I couldn't help myself," she said, shrugging, and I shook my head at her. "Ibrahim sends his best wishes. His wife is due to deliver the baby at the end of this week, so they couldn't drive out. But he wanted me to tell you happy anniversary, and he got you guys one of those cameras that prints immediately." Nicole told the both of us. "That's wonderful. Tell him we love the gift. It was very thoughtful of him to get us a Polaroid, and that we wish Lolita all the best on the delivery." I answered on behalf of Alarikas as well, as he was too busy cooing comfortingly at Milo to have heard what Nicole had said. She nodded before telling me she was off to search for Lydiaman to get some food, being hungry from her long journey. "You're welcome to stay the night if you'd up to driving by the end of it," I called after her. She was probably going to be drinking in Pat Warrior or not. Drunk driving was not a good idea for anyone. She nodded to me before casting one last glance at Milo, who was giggling away merrily at something Alarikas had said before she was off. "What are my favorite boys up to?" I asked, and Milo was actually turning red in the face, trying not to tell me what was going on. But he would keep his promise to his daddy. I sent a curious glance towards Alarikas, and he shrugged his shoulders suspiciously innocently. "You'll see." Alarikas mouthed to me, smirking, his right eye dropping into a wink that had my brows raising. It was probably to do with what he had gotten me for our anniversary, but this year my gift was pretty spectacular too. Alarikas was admittedly quite good at gift giving, and it always kept me on my toes because I was basically horrible. But luckily with Alarikas, as long as the gift was one that showed you had put a lot of thought into it, he was happy. He also wasn't used to receiving gifts, so he had little else to compare mine to. But that just made me want to make his gifts even more special. He deserved only the best. "Can we open gifts now, Mama?" Milo asked excitedly, earning himself a big grin from Alarikas. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm," I answered, cocking my head towards the gift table to get them to follow me. People began to gather as they noticed us standing around the gifts now, to see either what gifts we received or our reactions to the gifts they got us. Lillian was by my side as I picked up the first one, which was from one of the Northern Alphas and turned out to be a toaster. A new edition of the one he had gotten Alarikas and I for our wedding, if I remembered correctly. I was starting to think he really didn't like us. As we went through the pile, we ended up with a few far too expensive to be appropriate accessories. Some home decor and, surprisingly enough, an air conditioning system. Although the palace had a central system, we thanked them all the same. "Do you think we can sneak off now?" Alarikas whispered, and I scoped the Great Hall. Those of drinking age were either too drunk to notice, or too immersed into their own conversations. The younger ones were either playing, and the horny alpha teens were flirting with each other. "Now's good," I said to him, quickly grabbing my gift and following Alarikas to the exit, who was carrying a sugar-crazed Milo in one arm and a prettily wrapped gift box in the other. I grabbed Lilium's soft hand in mine, pulling her along with me. My breath hitched as I heard someone call out to Alarikas, but as I glanced back, the poor sick couple, Frank and Victoria, were distracting the female alpha. We quickened our pace, keeping our heads down as we practically sprinted through the hall. Lilium and I unable to contain our laughter at the way Alarikas was trying to keep a bright and energetic Milo while holding on to the gift and clearing our path of drunk dancers that had strayed from the dance floor. As we made it out of the grand hall and near the staircase, Alarikas put Milo down as we all raced towards the library. Alarikas and I purposely going the slowest in the stairs in case Milo or Lilium were to slip. With that much sugar, it was useless to try to reinforce the no running in the house rule. I felt like doing laps around the house myself. Who was I to stop them? Milo burst through the doors of the library, holding them open for the rest of us, and I ruffled his hair as I walked through, hearing it shut as Alarikas came in. We spent a moment simply trying to catch our breaths, the kids on our knees panting while Alarikas got the fire going. We made our way to the fireplace, settling down on the cushions in front of it, all snuggled up, Alarikas and I sitting facing one another while the kids sat snuggled into our sides. Alarikas passed me my gift first, and I smiled, taking the surprisingly light box from him. I sent him a curious glance as I felt the gift rattle around inside. I hoped to God he had not gotten me a bird and then put it in a box, since the box did not have any holes. He would be gifting me a dead bird, not exactly my idea of romantic. Undoing the bow on top of the box, I reached within it, half expecting to feel a small, still, furry body, so I was quite pleasantly surprised when all I felt was a paper package. I pulled it out, my breath hitching as I saw the bright blue stamp. The bright blue stamp of the free lands. Tears sprung to my eyes as I looked up to meet Alarikas' gaze. He gave me a small smile, nodding his head encouragingly towards the envelope. My hands were trembling as I tried to pull it open, a tear dropping down to my cheek. "What's wrong, Mama?" both my kids asked, both of them on their knees trying to get a better look at my face. "Your mom is fine. Would you to give Mama and Daddy a second? Why don't the both of you go pick out a few books? We'll read them to you before bed," Alarikas said, and neither of the kids looked anywhere convinced but trusting their father to take care of me. Lilium grabbed her brother's hand, leading him to the children's book collection we had acquired over the years. Alarikas shuffled closer to me, gently resting his hand over mine, and pulled the package away from me. He tore it open from the top cleanly, then passed it back to me, rubbing circles into my back gently. I pulled out the letter they had written, a few photos falling out. Picking it up, a huge smile came to my face as I saw my parents. They both looked a bit older obviously, but they looked glowingly happy. My dad had his arm around my mother's shoulders, and they both were smiling hugely at the camera. In the one behind it, my mom was laughing at something my dad had said, and in the last she looked as though she was scolding him. Clearly well deserved, as he was wearing that guilty but amused smile of his. I unfolded the letter, skimming through it. They were doing well, and they missed me and of course were very sad that they hadn't been at my wedding or to see my children when they had been born. They were both working as tellers at their local bank, and had never been happier. "You sent them pictures of the kids?" I asked Alarikas, earning to look at him. "I found those letters that you wrote, the one at our wedding, then when you got pregnant with Lilium and then Milo, but never told me about. I sent them along with some pictures of you three just going about your more routine," Alarikas said, and I turned around, wrapping my arms around his waist as I nuzzled my face into the crook of his neck. "You are the best thing to happen to me," I whispered to him, and he smiled, leaning down to press his lips to mine. I kissed him back slowly. The lingering taste of the macaron he had had with his natural taste had my mind reeling. I pulled away from his lips, my eyes dropping to his lips that looked even more red. But I really did not want to start a make-out session with our children in the same room. "Your turn," I whispered. Reaching back, I grabbed a gift, putting it into his lap. He ripped off the red wrapping paper I had wrapped it in, and my heart began to pound in my chest. I wasn't even sure if this was authentic, but I hoped with all my heart it was. His jaw seemed to slacken as he uncovered the painting. His eyes trailed over it disbelieving lie before rising to meet mine. His honey eyes glossed over with unshed tears. He raised it up to get a better look at it. The painting was of a woman with black, glossy hair that fell to her slender waist, long almond-shaped onyx eyes, surrounded by thick, long lashes much like Alarica's, thin but red lips and a slender nose. Her taunt skin seemed to glow even in the painting. She was breathtaking. I couldn't even imagine how beautiful she must have been in real life. Her thin figure adorned with a long, shimmery-looking black skirt and thin white shirt with long sleeves. "How did you get this?" Alaricus asked, his voice trembling as he looked down at the portrait of his mother. "It took a lot of research, but the king had a portrait of your mother drawn. It was nearly destroyed when I found it, but I had it restored," I told him, and he gently set it aside, tugging me into his arms. He pressed his trembling lips to my forehead in a tender kiss. I was beginning to forget what she looked like. "I can't even begin to thank you for this," Alaricus said. Grabbing my hand into his, he pressed a kiss to the back of it. I cradled his cheek in my palm, leaning forward to capture the lone tear that trailed down his cheek. "She's beautiful," I told him, and he smiled, nodding, turning his head to press a kiss to my palm. "She would have loved you. I know she would have. You're better than what she even could have wanted from me, my love," Alaricus said, staring at me, his eyes warming up with the adoring way in which he is looking at me. "Kids, come here. You want to see pictures of you grandparents?" I asked them, and the both of them immediately came running towards us. They jumped onto us, making us laugh. We swung them into our laps, wrapping our arms around them as we showed them the pictures my parents had sent, and the portrait of Alaricus' mother. I had wanted so badly to get a picture of Alaricus' sister, but I unfortunately couldn't find anything of her. Milo and Lydium listened attentively as we told them stories about our parent. They soon began to yawn, crashing down from their sugar highs. We spread them out more comfortably, keeping their heads in our laps. As the both of them fell asleep, I ran my fingers through Milo's hair, looking up at Alaricus to see him already staring at me. "First I thought you gave me the entire world when you said you loved me. Then when you said yes to marrying me. Then once again when we had Lydium. And then Milo. You've given me everything I have by being with me, Angel. I never thought of a life as beautiful as this, but you made it possible. The best gift I ever got was you, miracle. You're my everything," Alaricus said, making my eyes burn with tears again. "I love you," I whispered to him simply in response, and his plump lips tilted into a heartwarming smile at my words. "I love you," he replied. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the story, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to get notifications for updates.